You needed an easy blue go live button day. You deserved that. I've got a present for you. Hold on.
From clicking it to it is Thursday, September 3rd, 2020, 5:01 p.m. You know, it was just one of those days where weird things happened, and for different reasons, Kate and I both needed a kind of easygoing, substanceless, in lieu of fun. And so we called our favorite person to just chill out and be substanceless with. And I actually mean that in the highest compliment kind of way. Alan,
am I just your pretty face? Because I'm okay with that. If that's what it comes down to. If I'm just, I'm easy on the eyes, and you can just tune out everything I'm saying. That's what I've been going for some time now.
That's right. And we're trying to be chill, and we're going to start saying dude before or in the middle of or at the end of every sentence, dude. And
I might abide a little bit just to kind of really bring
Alan abides.
Alan abides.
And Alan Rozenshtein, we are not allowed to have fun anymore. So in lieu of fun, we've got you.
It's not great, but it's COVID times. We're all doing the best we can.
So I want to tell
Alan, did you?
Oh no, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, Alan, before Ben tells us my story, have we shown you the pictures of the lamb prosciutto?
No, I want to.
Have you seen it yet?
No, I think I may have seen it.
Picture's been up.
I think I may have seen it on Twitter. It looked good.
Oh. Yeah.
Did you send it? Did you send pieces of it? Yeah. Didn't you send some to Ben? Or
I'm sending some to Ben
the lamb
on Saturday.
Kind of
I have
like
a whole plan.
We always
you're just waiting for it.
Waiting for the lamb prosciutto, but it actually has been a lot of the life of In Lieu of Fun without lamb prosciutto actually darkening my doorstep.
Well, I had to give it lots of test runs before I sent it to you, because I don't know what I'd do without a co-host, because I don't have access to the big blue button. And so I just had to kind of, now it seems to be totally safe. And you'll get them soon. I told you I have a whole plan for packaging it that I'm going to reuse this box of cheese that I'm getting.
Did you just hang it in the basement for a couple of weeks?
Yeah, I was in the basement for 10 weeks, 3 months, 10 weeks, 12. It was came out of the basement. Now it's in the refrigerator, like this huge leg of lamb. just lives there.
There are great pictures of Kate live on In Lieu of Fun, wielding. I think the appropriate word is wielding or bearing. It's almost like a weapon, the lamb prosciutto. Yeah. And then taking a much too small knife and trying to section it. And
I murdered it. I did it so wrong. I got much better at that.
And then discovering, like God on the day of creation, that it was good. And
really good.
So there we go. I'm still waiting for my hunk of lamb prosciutto to show up.
It's happening. It's happening.
Now, one thing you do need to know about Alan is that he is an effortlessly great cook. That is, he just cooks stuff and it seems like it's easy, but he's really, really good at it.
That is very kind of you. But it's not effortless. It took me many years. Can I actually tell you? I feel like this is a good story for In Lieu of. This may be like a perfect In Lieu of Fun story.
Good.
Can I tell you where I started from in terms of cooking? Because I feel like I think this should bring hope to many people whose initial cooking experiences have not always been so great. So yeah, cooking has been my hobby for a while. I really like it. It's really fun. And I started really from the worst possible place imaginable. Here is my kind of cooking 101 story. So when I was 21, I spent a summer in Moscow in Russia. I was working for the State Department. And you're in college, right? So your meals are all provided for.
And wait a second, just so that people know, you are native Russian speaking, I guess, child of Soviet immigrants.
That's right. That's right. The classic child of Soviet Russian Jews who emigrated in the 70s. But I was born here, but I grew up speaking Russian, and so it was a fun kind of experience.
Moscow.
Oh, Moscow! It's a weird city. I mean, I was 20, so I liked everything. It's really easy to like places when you're 20, and it's a profoundly strange place. It's sort of like if Las Vegas was the capital of a nuclear state, right? Like
with the Kremlin.
Yeah, it's sort of like, it's like a combination of the Kremlin and Las Vegas, all in one. I mean, it's a really fun place, and this was in 2005. So, Putin was in office, obviously, and the repression was beginning, right? So part of my job at the embassy was to go fly around the country and look at the state of the Russian oil economy after they put Khodorkovsky, who was the head of Yukos and kind of a sort of one-time rival to Putin. They just put him in jail, right? But Russia could still have gone one way or the other. So I think it was a more fun time. It was a more fun time in Moscow. But so I get there. It was really. I don't know if they still have interns at the embassy there, but it's a really cool job. Anyway, so they kind of give you like a place on embassy apartments, and I flew in on a Sunday, and I got in at like Sunday at 5 p.m. and some guy from the embassy came and picked me up from the airport and drove me to the embassy apartments. And so I get there, it's like 7 p.m. and I'm jet lagged. I haven't slept for a while. And he's like, well, see you tomorrow morning. Bye. And so I was just there, and I decided to cook dinner for myself. Like maybe the first time in my life that had happened. And I decided that the best time to learn how to cook would be on a Sunday at 7 p.m. in a new country. And so like what a normal, yeah, exactly. So like what a normal person would have done would be to go to the nearest like McDonald's or like kebab stand and just get some food. But I'm an idiot. So I went to the grocery store and decided to cook myself a proper Russian dinner, which I of course had no idea what that was because my mother, who is the really good cook in the family and who kind of ultimately taught me how to cook, actually hates Russian food. So didn't cook Russian food when I was a child. So anyway, so I go to the supermarket, and what I end up buying is a head of cabbage. And what I decided I was going to make myself is cabbage soup, which is a pretty standard Russian food. And not understanding how soup worked, I figured that what you do is you buy a head of cabbage, and I swear to you, this story is 100% accurate. You buy a head of cabbage, you put it in a stock pot, you cover it with water, and then you just cook it.
Just the whole cabbage?
Just the whole, like, why not?
The whole cabbage.
Just the whole cabbage, right? Like, why not?
And it just magically
turns
disassociates into bite-sized pieces.
Yeah, well, imagine if imagine you're like a 20-year-old ding dong who's really into like mathematics and philosophy, and so like really likes first principles approaches to things. Like, what else do you think? Like, what do you think cabbage soup would be made out of, right? So, I bought one head of cabbage, but then I'm fancy, so I also bought a box of powdered mustard for flavor. So I get back home. It's like 10 p.m. at this point, and now all the restaurants are closed. So I am committed, and so I put this cabbage. I think I may have taken like the outer leaves off. So I put the cabbage in the stock pot. I covered it in water.
That's progress. That's better than most people would do.
And I just like turned the water on.
Go, Alan.
I know, right? And I turn the water on, and it starts cooking. And like cabbage is a cruciferous vegetable. It's a brassica, and the problem is that when you cook the living crap out of it, it just becomes this like sulfurous, like it like smells like what I think a great revival fire and brimstone sermon would have like sounded like, right? Like it just,
is this like the Charles Dickens Oliver Twist cookbook or something?
Yeah. Except by choice, not by necessity.
Like so I cook it boiled cabbage,
and I just keep cooking it, thinking that like something will. So that did not work. And then in the end, in desperation, I think, okay, well, I have this box of powdered mustard. Let me add it. And so I open it and I just dump it into the stock pot. But of course, when you add powdered mustard to a steaming thing of water, what you end up is like Verdun in World War I, right? You end up with just a cloud of mustard.
Yeah, you
gas.
weaponized.
I essentially weaponized
cabbage.
Yeah, so I had to run out of the apartment because like my face is just. Anyway, so in the end, I took the cabbage out, sliced it into like watermelon slices, mixed the mustard powder with water. Of course, at this point, whatever nutrients are in this cabbage is just they're completely gone. And so that is my first attempt at cooking dinner. I have improved since then.
This raises a fascinating question, Alan, which is, how did you come by a second attempt
at cooking dinner?
At cooking dinner, because most people faced with such an ambitious project and such an unmitigated catastrophe would next night go to the kebab stand. Yeah.
There was a lot of kebab stand for the rest of that summer. I don't remember. So what I ended up eating that summer was what it was really bad. I ate 2 meals for the rest. So one problem in Russia, in Moscow, is that it's actually an incredibly expensive city, right? So you can eat kebabs and those are pretty cheap, but anything that is like remotely, like going to a restaurant is impossible, right? It's insanely expensive actually.
So Russians mean something different by the word restaurant than Americans do.
What do you mean?
I mean, the word restaurant in Russian has this connotation of a whole evening out.
Yes. Yeah. It's like a whole. The performances.
Right. It's like a much. It's not simply you walk in, somebody seats you at a table, and then they bring you food that you order.
Yeah. You can't just like walk in and like get a plate of pasta and then leave. It's not how this works. Right. Yeah, you're now giving me kind of PTSD flashbacks to Brighton Beach and my grandmother's birthday parties in the mid '90s. Well, so I ended up making 2 meals for the rest of that summer. I kind of alternated them. I called them my Asian pasta and my Italian pasta. And they are insults both to the great continent of Asia and the great, peninsula of Italy. It was basically either like ground beef and soy sauce and spaghetti, or it was ground beef and tomato sauce and spaghetti. And that's basically, but I was 20, right?
2 different umamis.
I could eat that and feel great, right? And it was fine. But you see, this was before the days of YouTube. Because I didn't actually learn how to cook until like 3-4 years later, and that was when the kind of first generation of good YouTube cooking shows came on, where it was like not Emerald, it was like an actual cooking show. Like you didn't see the cook's face, you just saw the hands and the dish. And I like did that for a year, and it's pretty good.
They're so fascinating because I remember once, like I was talking, I had a friend who was like an expert metalsmith and he built bicycles, but he was also a tremendous chef. And he used to lament like these idiots on YouTube. He was a youngish guy and he would like lament these idiots on YouTube that were learning all of these trades like through YouTube. And I was like, well, like you're like lucky enough to grow up with somebody that like taught you all of this stuff. Like your grandfather sat you down and taught you how to literally run a drill press. Like no, like not everyone has that. And so like, I think that this is true. This great people, we like totally take this for granted now. We all learn how to do these things. Like if you want to be, if you're self-motivated at all, you can learn anything like lamb prosciutto.
I learned how to change a flat tire on the side of the road with a jack in one hand and my cell phone in the other hand, right? Like I generally take a dim view of social media, but I will make an exception for YouTube, which in addition to having a lot of like flat earth QAnon nonsense, has some excellent educational content.
No, I also
like this. The sky has darkened behind bed.
Yeah, this is about to get bad,
it's about to get really ugly here. And maybe I should zoom out on myself so that you guys can see this storm, because it's going to be,
I would love that.
As the kids say, lit. See what I did there?
Kind of just,
yeah, it's real good.
It was really good. We were free associating stories, so now I'm going to tell a story about related to your mentioning of the time you learn how to change a flat tire. So I actually know how to change a flat tire and have done so many times. And I have this terrible kind of gruesome story of this one time that I did this. I was clerking in Geneseo, New York, in the Finger Lakes for my Second Circuit judge. And I came out, it was like a hot July day. I came out towards the end of my clerkship. I was wearing a dress, like a nice sundress, and my car just has a flat tire, just flat. And I get the jack out, and I kind of get a little impatient, and so I had kind of jacked it up too high, and then couldn't get the lug nuts off because it was spinning, and so had to bring it down. But while all this was happening, a few people had walked by me in a pink sundress, changing a tire in the thing, and it's upstate New York, and people are like, this woman needs help, someone should be helping her. And I am totally fine, right? I'm completely totally fine. But there is an on-call deputy, a sheriff's deputy, who would just sit like a lump in front, the lobby of this local building, every day. And his name was Randy. And I don't have any nice things to say about Randy, because you will hear why. So Randy comes lumbering out and is like, let me help you. And I'm like, no, I'm really okay. He's like, no, let me help you. I've got this. I'm you're totally fine. And so I'm like, oh, I can do this. And I was like, he tries to think, I'm like, no, we got to lower it a little so that there's some friction so that I can get the have some torque to get the lug nuts off and loosen them. And he goes, no, I've got it. And he just kicks the tire, to try to kick the thing, and the whole jack just rocks, and my hand is on the top of the tire. The tire just, the whole car and the tire just literally just falls onto my hand, and my hand is crushed at the top of the between the car and the the wheel well, the top of the wheel well, and the wheelbase,
that's very bad.
And I am just very calmly, I'm get another jack, find another jack. And I just and he's just I'm just so angry at this fuckhead at this point. I'm just I had this under control, and now maybe I've lost 4 fingers. I am completely not this is, oh my God, I was so angry. Anyways, he freaks out. There's someone who actually knows what they're doing. They have an actual real jack in their car. They come over and they jack it up, and my entire hand is just it was not a good scene.
It's like a cartoon, where you just see the tire tracks on the hand or on the flattened cartoon body.
It was just purple and blue. And just it was just and I couldn't move it, and I was just but nothing had been
chronic hand injury. See,
there's I'd forgot. Oh wow,
that is one of the recurrent themes of Lieu of Fun is Kate injuring her hands.
Well, how is it? I mean, clearly you recovered.
Oh no, I got really, really, really lucky. So I have the ignominious, whatever, how you say that word, the distinction.
Ignominious? Is it
ignominious? Yes. Distinction of being the only clerk that my judges secretaries had to drive to the hospital, to the ER. And so they drove me to the ER, and there were no broken bones and no lacerations. It just was crushed, and it looked like it was going to recover. And so they gave me, I didn't want to take pain pills. So I just took a bunch of ibuprofen and put it on ice and above my head for 2 days. And it I could use it again pretty reliably within a week. But Randy got a big fuck you from me with my one good finger when I walked back through the office the next day. He came and apologized, and I was like, I don't really actually hold grudges, but I think this is like, I'm going to make an exception for you because this was like, I told you not to help me. And then you almost made me lose my hand. So yeah, anyway.
Yeah. Nicely done.
Yeah.
So Alan, I'm going to put the camera on me now because the storm is pretty awesome. So you're going to be a disembodied voice for a little while. And I'm just going to turn the camera on the storm. But the last time I saw you in person, you cooked a pretty incredible bolognese sauce, which kind of took all day.
Is it Marcella Hazan's?
It is Kenji Alt Lopez's, and I want to be very clear. At least half of the credit of bolognese sauces in my household has to go to my wonderful and very talented wife Hannah Nieprash. We divide responsibilities, and Bolo, as we call it, tends to be the driving force. And then there's like a big lasagna situation that happens. It's really amazing.
Anyway,
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
So my question is, when you decided to learn to cook, what did that actually involve?
Yeah, so I was when I went in 2009 or something, I guess I was working in Connecticut. I was working for a big hedge fund at the time. Not actually doing anything useful. It was one of those hedge funds that would hire like theoretically ambiently smart people from decent schools who didn't know anything, and like hopefully get some value add out of them. I don't know, whatever. And I was newly single, and bored and a little sad, and I was not good at my job. And I was also making a lot of money, right? Because it's a hedge fund. But as it turns out, I don't have like standard hedge fund tastes. Like I don't know. Doesn't really do it for me. So what I would really do is I would go like on payday, and then I would go to Whole Foods and I'd buy the extra fancy tomatoes. And that felt like really luxurious. And that's when I decided I wasn't going to be a hedge funder. It just didn't seem quite worth it. But yeah, I'd come home. Pardon?
Didn't seem worth it for the fancy tomatoes.
Well, yeah, because I'm saying I figured I could get fancy tomatoes on less than a hedge fund salary.
And that was really the deciding thing.
I mean, kind of. It was one of the deciding. Then I decided I'd go be a national security lawyer. So I'd come home at like 8 and then just cook till like 4 in the morning, and I found it really stress relieving. And then what was really cool, I did that for 2 years, and then I got into law school, and then I had a summer between this job and law school, and I decided to do all of the, I had this bucket list of stuff I wanted to do. So I went to like a Zen Buddhist monastery for a while, and went to England to sing choral music, and then enrolled for a month in what was then called the French Culinary Institute in Soho in New York City, where they would offer they offered the first month of like 6 month of the kind of 6 month professional program. They offered the first month to yuppies at like a 10x markup, but it was really fun, and did that full time for a month, and that was awesome. And so, yeah, I feel like that's when I kind of learned how cooking works, which is not to say that I do a lot of the really froofy French recipes that I learned there, because they're a bit fiddly and unnecessary, but you sort of learn to treat cooking like a serious thing, right? There's like, you learn like the right way to think about it.
All right. So let's talk about, since we've covered the cooking.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Brad Wigman.
Let's talk about Brad Wigman. Brad, if you're out there, I love you and miss you, man. Hang tough.
Brad, there are 84 people watching the show live on Crowdcast. There's probably another 100 or so on YouTube. I suspect none of those people is Brad Wigman, though he does live in the neighborhood. We're neighbors. So tell us about Brad, who he is, and why you wrote a Lawfare piece about him yesterday.
Yeah, so Brad Wigman is, or as the case may be, was the longtime head of what is called the Office of Law and Policy in the National Security Division in the Department of Justice. So DOJ is divided into a bunch of divisions. There's the Criminal Division and the Antitrust Division and the Civil Rights Division, And after 9/11, in like 2003 or 4, Congress decided that it needed a new division to coordinate all the national security stuff that was going on. And so they created this division, and there are a bunch of offices in it, a bunch of prosecutors that do terrorism stuff and intelligence stuff, and there are a bunch of people who deal with foreign intelligence surveillance and work on that. And then there's this really small kind of like 25-person shop called the Office of Law and Policy. And the main job of that office is to coordinate all of the legal policy work is to do DOJ's legal policy work in national security, and then also to represent the Department of Justice in the interagency national security policy process. So, whenever the U.S. government wants to do something involving national security, that will almost always involve the law in some way. There are some exceptions, obviously, in like pure military missions, but most of the time you want to have like some lawyers in the room, and generally people deferred a lot to the DOJ lawyers, and that was us. And so there's a deputy assistant attorney general who's the head of that office, and for the whole time I was there, and for many years afterwards, and until very recently, it was Brad, who I think has been at the department for like 25 years, and has been in this job for basically a decade. And he got removed from this job. This is in ABC.
Whom?
Well, it's interesting. So he got removed, it sounds like, by Attorney General Barr, which struck me as a little odd. I'm not entirely sure why Attorney General Barr would care so much about who the Deputy Assistant Attorney General is in the national security. I mean, you would think that the Assistant Attorney General for National Security, like the head of the National Security Division, would make this choice. But it sounds like, at least from what ABC reported, Barr made this decision, and has replaced him, if reports are correct, with and I forget his name just off the top of my head. I can probably look it up on my law firm. Yeah, Kellen Dwyer, who is currently, or until very recently, was a cyber crimes prosecutor at the Eastern District of Virginia, and by all accounts, a perfectly good prosecutor. Kind of.
Although one who is principally known for having accidentally exposed the prosecution of Julian Assange.
Yes, that is correct. Which was a unfortunate. Sounds like I don't know the guy, and I don't know that particular incident. But from what I've read, sounds like an unfortunate copy paste mistake, and that's embarrassing, and that's not good. But like this stuff does in fact happen, and the fact that everything else about him sounds like he was an excellent lawyer, and so no shade on him, but I'm my concern is that a 36-year-old prosecutor who's not even that experienced as a prosecutor, as far as prosecutors go, is now, for some reason that I just cannot fathom, going to be the Deputy Assistant Attorney General for Law and Policy. That he would have, when I was there, I was part of the hiring process. We all pitched in, and he would have made a great candidate for like a staff position, and maybe even in the case of, he's like a well-connected young conservative lawyer up and coming, he would have made like a good counselor to the Assistant Attorney General. But I found it pretty suspect or pretty disconcerting that the office is going to be headed by someone that, as far as I can tell, does not have the experience to do a good job, right? And I don't say that I wouldn't have the experience to do a good job, right? I mean, this is a tough, important job, and so I wanted, in part, I wanted to write something in the kind of public record about how good Brad was, what an amazing lawyer he was, and what a great public servant and a great boss. And I want him to know that people on the outside are rooting for him, and also wanted to point out that this is not a great look from Bill Barr.
So we have a bunch of questions on articles that you have written on Lawfare recently, including about Letitia James and including about Brad Wigman, and then we have a final question. I'm gonna save Daniel for last, about a general assessment of Bill Barr. So let's start with Tony, who's got a Brad Wigman question. Sir, the floor is yours.
Hello. Thank you very much, everyone. Yeah, I just read the Brad Wigman article last night, and What I was wondering about was strategies for Joe Biden, assuming he wins, hoping he wins, and what would be your advice to the transition? You had mentioned that Wegman, if I'm pronouncing that right, would be a great rehire. And I'm wondering if the fastest path towards reestablishing like a respect for expertise would be if Biden just simply rehired all these career guys that have gotten fired or have resigned and bring back in Obama's political appointees, seeing that they've been vetted. And if that would be the fastest path, or what other advice you might give to a Biden transition to kind of reestablish the integrity of the Justice Department.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the nice things about Biden in this regard is that he's very much running, and I don't think he would disagree, as the third term of Obama's presidency, right? That's, I think, a lot of the appeal of Biden. And so the lot of the people that have worked for Obama, I think we would expect to come back into a Biden administration. I think in general, there was and I was part of this. I mean, senior official by any, I was not missed, but I was part of a kind of a much larger exodus of folks that when Trump was elected said, okay, I'm out of here. This is just not going to go well. I can't, I'm not going to be able to do a good job in this environment. And so I suspect if Biden wins, there will be a huge number of people to choose from. Now, whether or not he rehires career people, whether he inserts his own political people, I think that matters less than that he picks good people. The nice thing is that there are a lot of good people, I think, who would love to go back and try to rebuild a lot of these institutions. I mean, I think the case of Brad Wigman is a little special in that he's just so obviously such an easy rehire. I mean, I'm also very biased. He is the senior official I worked most closely with, so I'd love to see him rehired. Also, he's just there, and he very well could be rehired like 4 months from now, because of how close to the election he was removed. But yeah, I think bringing back a lot of the old Obama crew, and even maybe some of the like never Trumper crew, frankly. And sort of restaffing that, I think, would be certainly an interesting view. At the same time, while Biden himself, in my sense, is very much of the kind of third Obama term, one thing he has done, probably, I think, very smartly from just a political perspective, is to move quite a bit to the left. He's although externally he's running as the third Obama term, I think internally he's running more as a Biden-Sanders unity ticket. Now, of course, Sanders isn't on the ticket, but when you look at the kind of task forces that Biden has set up with the Sanders crew and who's actually running Biden's campaign. So I think it will be interesting if Biden wins, to read all the kind of Politico stories about whether the blob has won in getting rehired, or if there's kind of a shift to the left in that regard. As to bigger questions of how to fix the Justice Department, I mean, that's a really interesting one. It's a lot of it's limited by constitutional limits, right? I mean, I think if we've learned anything, it's that norms are probably insufficient to govern something like the Department of Justice. Unfortunately, as we've been learning that, the Supreme Court has also been sending a lot of really, I think, pretty clear signals that, especially when it comes to core executive functions like the Department of Justice, there's very, very little wiggle room for any kind of congressional involvement that does things like create independence for certain officials or anything like that. So yeah, it's a tricky question, but fortunately, I hear there's a great book that Lawfare is publishing that will go through all of the ways to fixing the U.S. government.
Indeed. We are publishing next week or the week after. Jack Goldsmith and Bob Bauer, who Jack was the head of OLC in the Bush administration, and Bob was Barack Obama's White House counsel for the first 3 years. And they got together and wrote a very substantial piece of work on the extent to which, across 14 or 15 different areas Trump has deviated from the norms of the presidency and what reform options are available. It's a really, really good piece of work, and I'm super proud that Lawfare is publishing it. We will have them both on either together or separately to talk about different chapters of the book, a whole bunch of which are issues that you guys have asked about on repeated occasions. All right, so this brings us to David Batz's question about Letitia James, which I'm so glad you asked, and I couldn't tell from your question whether it was a question that you knew that Alan had written about or not. But if not, it is a remarkable coincidence because Alan has a substantial piece on Letitia James and the NRA.
As a general matter, I don't believe in coincidences, but I think you took a rather, maybe a little controversial position. What are your thoughts on the unusual actions of New York AG Letitia James' effort to dissolve the National Rifle Association? But really, given the corruption identified by insiders like Colonel North, for heaven's sake, is there not a reasonable predicate for additional investigation?
Yeah, so I think there definitely is. I should make it clear. I am a very standard center-left Democrat, and so have no particular interest in the NRA. Don't like them. Don't agree with the Supreme Court's Second Amendment jurisprudence. Think that, and here I'm now making myself Senate unconfirmable for all time, think that at some point this country will have to repeal the Second Amendment. And, this will be one of the great intergenerational struggles of our time. All of that being said, right, I have no problem with investigating the NRA, and I don't even have a problem with suing them in a sense out of existence if the point is, because they're going to be so busy being sued and having to defend themselves and being investigated and having to pay back restitution or whatever it is that they have done, that they will cease to function as a effective organization, right? That does not per se bother me. What bothers me is that this lawsuit appears to be kind of weirdly tone deaf to the fact that Letitia James is using her position to go after the one of the most important political organizations on the right. Now, when I wrote that, I think some folks on Twitter correctly pointed out that, like, well, look, the NRA is not supposed to be a political organization, right? There are all these there are all these rules about how nonprofits work that make it that they can't just be political parties, et cetera, et cetera. And all of this at the very least might be true. I'm not actually a nonprofit law expert. So I'm not so much making a legal argument that what Letitia James is doing is illegal, or that dissolution is not a legal remedy. I mean, I'm sure it is. They're all very smart lawyers at the New York AG's office. It's that in this country, right, we have a norm, and I know, like, a lot of people groan because norms are boring to talk about, but we have a norm that you don't go after your political opponents if you can avoid it, right? And that you try to let people, especially those people that you disagree with, retain their ability to express themselves in the public forum, while simultaneously going after clear violations of law. And so I think what bothered me most about the lawsuit was not that ultimately she decided that the only possible remedy is dissolution. I mean, maybe that is ultimately all that's possible. Maybe this thing is so screwed up that you have to just start over again. And at the end of the day, it's not like the gun rights movement is going to wither if the NRA goes away. But that she didn't even seem to try, either in the complaint or in the public remarks. And that's what I found almost even more striking, right? I would have thought that, and I will say I got to give a lot of credit to the reporters who pressed her on this in the press conference in which she announced this. They said, why are you seeking dissolution rather than reforms? And she didn't have a good answer, and that's really what surprised me. Right. She kind of stammered something about, well, there's a lot of corruption's bad. But she didn't actually have the kind of answer that I would expect from a responsible law enforcement officer of, look, I get the First Amendment issues. I get the issues around a lot of people care about the NRA and care about gun rights. And I really want to protect that, even though, especially because they disagree with that, here's what I'm trying to do to protect the organization. At the same time, I want to make sure that they're not defrauding their members. So here's what I'm going to do, and blah, blah, blah. And I've really thought about this. And here's why I decided. It turns out that, I can't save the organization, but I really tried, guys. Then I would have had no problem with what she was saying. So that's kind of my main concern. And then just my bigger concern is, I spend a lot of my intellectual time criticizing the left, mostly because to me the current right, as represented by Trump and the current Republican Party, is beyond saving. Right? There's no point. I think there's not a lot of point in criticizing these folks, because they're not going to change. And they're not going to be the people that you can work with, right? They're these never Trumpers and Lincoln Project people, and they're fine, but they're Democrats at this point, essentially, right? So to me, what I think is really valuable is for people on the left to hold each other accountable, and to make sure that they don't just say, well, Trump is such a bad guy, so if we're only half as bad as he is and our cause is just, then we're going to be okay. So, this is kind of what I plan to do with my life for the next 5 years, which is annoy all of my fellow center lefties.
All right. All of which brings us to Daniel's question. I keep waiting for Daniel to just vanish into that chair, particularly on days where he's wearing a black shirt. And so there's actually, from the audience point of view, you really can't tell the difference between the clothes. Like, only his skin.
The clothes and the man.
The clothes and the chair kind of become one. And, but he has clearly a substantive question to ask. What is on your mind, Daniel?
So my question is motivated by Barr's recent comments about voting twice on CNN with Wolf Blitzer, which have got to be some of the dumbest comments I've ever heard uttered by an attorney general. So if Barr hasn't secured his position as worst attorney general ever, who's he competing with, and what does he have to do?
I mean, didn't Nixon's go to jail or something? I'm not that. John Mitchell, right? That was Nixon.
Yeah,
John Mitchell went to prison. But that was for conduct after he was AG.
I guess that's right.
So, like, while he was AG, he was probably also a criminal. But the conduct for which he was imprisoned was while he was running the beautifully named Committee for the Re-election of the President, a.k.a. CREEP.
It's like, you really, like, if we hadn't lived the last 4 years... Yeah, you'd think that that wasn't remember when that was a crazy idea that he called it CREEP?
Well,
yeah. I don't know. Sorry.
Only his political foes called it CREEP. I think the Nixon people called it the Committee for Re-elect.
Yeah,
I think the Democrats called it CREEP.
I will. Well, yeah. This just also reminds me of the great ass law scandal of 20. Of whatever it was, when after Justice Scalia passed away, they quickly renamed George Mason Law School after Justice Scalia. And look, if there's going to be a law school named after Justice Scalia, it's either going to be Notre Dame or George Mason, right? It kind of makes sense. But they named it Antonin Scalia School of Law, and that didn't scan super well.
Law, yeah.
Yeah. Well, now it's the Antonin Scalia Law School, which is not that much better, unfortunately.
Wait, what do they think that they got out of changing the law school to School of Law?
They changed it.
From ass law to
law school.
Oh.
Yes.
Yes. Law, is different from ass law.
The problem is, I have a family member who attends that institution, and she once told me that it went from ass law to assless, which wasn't obviously an improvement. But I digress.
But Barr has some competition, because to this day we don't have arrests and sweeps of people yet named the Barr raids. But
that
we
is
do
true.
have the Palmer raids for
No,
Mitchell Palmer.
That is true. I mean, I will say we also have 100 years of civilizational progress. So I you kind of have to handicap a little bit, right? Like they should know better.
Well, yeah, but look, I'm just saying, like, if you said you can keep Bill Barr as Attorney General, or you can have Mitchell Palmer, I don't know that you would go with Barr, or that you would go with Palmer over Barr. I'm not like I offer you the trade. You might say, Barr's a really bad guy, but at least he has some sense of the 21st century, and he hasn't arrested, random people on the basis of pure political belief.
Well, yes, I think that's right. I mean, I think the question is if Palmer had been born today, right? I think the comparison is not Barr versus Palmer. It's like it's what Palmer, how Barr would have operated in Palmer's time and how Palmer would have operated in Barr's time. And there I am actually less.
Wait, let me throw out another option for you.
Okay.
Roger Taney, Attorney General.
Was he AG?
Under Andrew Jackson.
Oh, interesting.
Now, he was later appointed to the Supreme Court, becomes Chief Justice on the death of John Marshall, but his rise to national prominence is as the attorney. It's before the Justice Department, of course. The Justice Department isn't created until 1870, but the Attorney General is kind of the legal advisor to the president, later put in charge of the Justice Department. Roger Taney is the Attorney General of the United States. I think Bill Barr, however bad he is, he hasn't written the Dred Scott.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I feel like, it's hard. It's hard to pick someone who wrote Dred Scott. I mean,
to be fair to Barr or to Taney, he didn't write the Dred Scott opinion in his capacity as Attorney General.
As Attorney General.
Maybe you could say he was a fine AG. It was just when he became Chief Justice that things went wrong. Barr has never become Chief Justice. I'm just saying, in answer to Daniel's question, Barr is not without some competition for the worst AG.
I think that's fair, though. Again, I would suggest it's important to compare apples to apples, right? So imagine you teleport Barr back to that time, and you have him, arise in a legal culture that doesn't have the benefit of the Civil War lessons and the Reconstruction amendments. Like, I don't know if his tenure would have been all that much more noble.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I do think there's a little bit of apples to alligators here. It's like the 19th century Attorney General before the creation of the Justice Department. It's really not the same office.
Yeah.
As the modern Attorney Generalship.
I just never thought I'd miss Alberto Gonzalez.
Like, let me just. True.
I'm just saying.
It's like a great line. That is great.
I'm just like the one thing that has just really kind of the level of, and obviously like there are very different levels of corruption going on in America today, right? Like the kind of corruption that you see from Trump and his kind of coterie is very different than the kind of corruption you see from Barr, right? There's no indication that Barr is personally corrupt, right? It's more of like a corruption of legal thought. Right. And just like this very strange. No, I mean, like there's corruption in like the pecuniary, like the way that just Trump is so obviously corrupt. Right. And then there's a kind of corruption in which like Barr is corrupt in the sense of, or like, like not being super into democratic norms. The thing I only mention it because like I never thought that, Oliver North would be a hero. I never thought that I would like, oh, man, Lindsey Graham. There was a man of integrity. There's just you go down the list of people, and it's really quite amazing.
No, but like, can we actually have a moment for that? Because I think that there is something to be said for like right now and in history generally, when the norms change out from underneath us, both because like things are actually progressing forward in a good way, like with the Me Too movement in certain ways and whatever else, but like also in terms of like when things get so bad that people who looked bad before look good. Like I've said many times in this show that I am like longing for the days where the worst thing you could say about a candidate was that he tied his dog to his car, like the roof of his car. Like I feel like that is like kind of this thing. And I just think that that's actually this really interesting moment that we have to kind of pause for when we go forward from this and kind of learn something from, because I feel like people have this, they're just so angry at like, you supported so-and-so and I'll never forgive you, or you did this and I'll never forgive you. And like, I don't know, who knows what fresh hell 2021 will bring us. Like, I just kind of feel like we have to make a little bit of sense, like in that regard. Does that, sorry, I ranted for a second.
Yes, I am.
And I can't see your faces because like you're blurred out for me. But
I am stockpiling dried beans in my basement, if that is fundamentally what you're asking.
I just placed a Rancho Gordo order. You haven't seen my gardens.
That, like, the lesson that I've taken from this and I mean this at the very personal level as well as at the political level, is you don't know what you don't know about people. And, you know, there are a group of people, including some who I would have sworn I shared values with, and who were basically philosophically similar to me, and I didn't think my politics were different from, who have been shocking. And there are also a group of people who I thought my politics were very different from, my values were very different from, who I feel very close to. And now, and I you know, I think in the case of politicians who are answering to constituencies, they're making a set of calculations that the rest of us aren't, which is, how do you keep yourself viable electorally, which is not a question that you or I have to answer. But 2 days after, I'm going to dish on you, Alan. 2 days after Donald Trump was elected, you were in my office and you said, I think I'm going to resign. And I said, you shouldn't do that. Alan was an AUSA at the time. And I said, you shouldn't do that, you know. And you said, I'm just not comfortable standing up in court and saying, I'm Alan Rozenshtein and I represent the United States under these circumstances, which is basically what you said earlier in the show. And there were a bunch of people who reacted that way. And there were a bunch of people who reacted, you know, by endeavoring to justify all kinds of things going on. And I would have been hard pressed to prospectively get who was who. And so my question is, do we now have this experience that we can use as a benchmark, or is it only a benchmark for a moment in time and a bunch of, like, we still don't know who anybody is, or now do we know who people are?
Yeah, it's rough, right? I mean, the problem, I think the problem is that very few people have a sufficiently kind of well-defined core of values and beliefs that you can actually predict their behavior in extreme moments. I think we all like to think that we are those people, right? We have integrity and a certain core self. But I think there's this famous line from Solzhenitsyn. I think it's in the Gulag Archipelago, and I'm probably butchering it, but it's something like, the line between good and evil runs through the heart of every man. And you know, who would rip out their own heart, right? And the point is that I think we exactly, you're gonna eat it, right? I think like the point is, okay, this is should have seen that coming. And what's the nice? But where's your nice Chianti?
Fava beans.
And fava beans.
You've got them.
So I think, sure. I mean, I think there are some people who are just unbelievably spineless and opportunistic, right? I mean, I don't think Lindsey Graham can ever be taken seriously ever again, right? I mean, you just can't. I think there are other people who, if things have broken a little bit differently, if their social and professional circles have been a little bit differently, you could imagine them having very different views, and you can imagine them next time around. I think of someone like, one thing that really surprised me was, when Stephen Calabrese, right, at Northwestern, who has been a pretty powerful supporter of the presidency, largely because of the judges, and he had some weird court packing thing, and I don't even know, right? And I think a lot of people just did not understand how such a self-avowed originalist and principled constitutionalist, et cetera, could have supported this. And then at some point he decided enough is enough. But and turned very much against the president, but did so based on what to me was, like, in the grand scheme of things, not that, compared to all the other bad things Trump had done, was not all that big of a deal. Something about the election. I don't even remember what the detail was. And so this is a bit of a rambly answer, but I think my point is, one of the things that is really, really frustrating is it is easy to want to divide the world into the good people and the bad people. And there are some truly good people and some truly bad people. And you do get some sense of that, right? But I think often we don't know who we are. Until the moment we are forced to choose, and how we choose and what side we choose is often quite a bit.
We
random.
don't know who we are until the moment that we're jet lagged and hungry in a foreign country, and we decide to make some cabbage soup and mustard gas.
And then we discover that who we really are all along was a moron.
Yeah.
And look at that beautiful, wow, that we really
bringing
brought
it all together here.
But
since you bring this up, I just want to close with a question specifically designed to maximally embarrass you.
Please do.
Tell the story of how you learned that islands do not float.
Okay. So I want to make
islands
a couple
do
of
not
things
what?
Float. I want to make a couple of things clear.
What the fuck?
So I just want to start a couple of things here. So
Did you not go to school? Like,
yeah,
what is no offense. There's only one island that floats, and it's in Dr. Dolittle.
So for some reason, I never took earth sciences as a kid. And this was before Wikipedia. And again, right, I'm like a first principles kind of guy. And so at some point, and I was a kid, I got into my head the idea that
I don't know what that is, but it increasingly sounds like a poor excuse for idiocy to me.
Yeah.
Saying that you're a first principles type of
guy. I'm a real thinker, guys. I'm a real intellectual. So I got into my head when I was really little, that islands floated, which if you're like 4 is not a crazy thing to think. Like, it's not nuts. And just no one disabused me of that notion. And I had just clearly developed this whole very complex conceptual schema around, well, if islands float, then what do bridges do, and how do tunnels work? And of course, I grew up on Long Island. So
how do tunnels work? They're fucking tunnels. Like, I don't. Well,
I thought they were tubes. Just like tubes in the water.
They are tubes.
Oh, well, but they're tubes under the seabed. I thought they were just tubes through the water. And this actually caused real problems, because when I was like 10 and my grandparents lived in New Jersey. And so we drive across through the tunnels, like the Holland Tunnel and the Lincoln Tunnel. And I was really worried that since it's just a tube floating in the water, if like a whale were to come up the Hudson River and hit the tunnel, we'd all drown. Anyway, so it was an interesting child. So at the age of 24, I'm in the car with guys, you too can teach the next generation of law students. I'm going to
blow your mind with this whole fact about tides thing in a second.
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
Next you're going to tell me the earth is round.
Oh my God.
So when I was 24, I was driving across, I think, the Brooklyn Bridge or something. And I was dating my then girlfriend, and it was my father, 3 of us in the car, and my dad's driving. I'm in the front seat. My then girlfriend's in the back seat, And I was just kind of musing to myself as I do about how amazing these bridges are, because they were built like 100 years ago, and just imagine like the sheer forces they have to overcome because of how they keep the land masses together. I thought they were like staples. and I just remember my dad going, and of course my dad is a Soviet Jew, so he goes, "What?" And there's this long.
I also am like, what?
Yeah, what? Yeah,
What?
And there's this long pause, and there's this there's this when like the Necker cube shifts, like it's like not the bunny but the rabbit, like not the old lady but the vases or something like that. And suddenly I realized that islands do not float, and I had been highly misled. And my dad's like trying not to drive off the bridge, and my girlfriend in the back seat is like clearly about to jump out of the window. She's so embarrassed. And I remember a year later, I was listening to This American Life, and they had a wonderful episode about moments like this, like the girl who thought unicorns were endangered, right? Or like the person who thought it's pronounced misled. And
the thousands of people who grew up thinking it was misled.
Yeah.
Or that,
what's misled?
that the word is pronounced misled.
I don't know what that word is.
Misled. There's a whole group of people who thinks the word is pronounced misled.
Including my wife.
Like epitome.
Yes. Yeah, epitome. And also, the whole episode is about this woman who thinks the crossing signs are pronounced zing.
Zing!
And that they're...
like a horse, there's a horse zing and a duck zing and a child zing.
Oh God!
And you know what? I will say, I will say I have this. It's a great icebreaker because when parties get boring, I always ask people, "What's the dumbest thing you've ever thought?" And I always win the game.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Congratulations. That's like
not close to that.
What's yours, Ben?
Mine is I, for some reason that I cannot identify, I grew up believing until embarrassingly late that the word haywire was spelled A-W-R-Y, and it was just a quirk of the English language that the word haywire looked like it was spelled awry. And I always had contempt for people who said gone awry because they didn't know that word was pronounced haywire.
There's like a really great line that I heard, which is like, never make fun of someone for mispronouncing a word because it means they learned it in a book, which I actually very much agree with. Like, if you're not acculturated to this, and then also I said hyperbole, and then I went and had a Greek roommate my freshman year in college, and she was like, it's hyperbole. And I was like,
wait, no, it's not. No. Everyone says never hyperbole. Yeah, I thought my other version of this, much less embarrassing, but for years I thought I didn't understand why the proof could ever be in the pudding. Like, why would you hide? Like, I thought it was like a weird scenario from Clue, like the smoking gun is in the Jell-O mold, and I could never understand why people kept saying that.
But that's also you can't have your cake and eat it too. Why would you want to have your cake for to eat it?
Yes,
but those are because the phrases actually changed.
That's right. That's right.
Like, that's not actually because you were an idiot. That's because we started abbreviating the phrases until the point that they didn't mean what they seemed to say anymore.
Or they changed, like, begs the question.
Yeah. Like or gild the lily, which of course, if you were to gild a lily, that'd be a pretty sweet looking lily. Like a gold leaf lily would actually be an improvement on most lilies. So, there's a whole. Anyway, everyone study earth sciences, children. It's at least the island's floating.
If you haven't voted in our poll yet, particularly if you're inclined to vote yes, I think Alan would feel better about himself if more people shared this particular.
Alan, did you watch the Dr. Dolittle with like Rex Harrison back in the day? It was like a live action Disney film. Because there is a floating island in Dr. Dolittle, and they're constantly on the search for it, like trying to find it with a giant snail on it or something. And like, anyways, like I just was thinking that like maybe you got that idea from that. Who knows?
I don't know. Can I just say, if it is in fact true that 15, if it is in fact true that like it looks like 17% of people believe that islands floated, that is so comforting. That is such a higher percentage than what I ever thought. But maybe people are just taking pity on me.
Notice that I didn't put in the age delimitation. Did you still believe
Still at the age of 24? Exactly.
24.
That's the real.
Like they gave you a fucking college degree and you were still like sitting. You're like,
Yeah,
I do
looking
also
at
think
from like an accredited university and everything.
I do
know.
think the interesting distinction between the people who merely voted no and the people who voted what the fuck, of course not.
Alan and Hannah
is an
should come back
interesting
on Saturday, and we should continue this discussion with people. Just like things that, like times that people thought one thing and they didn't know it. Like I went to college with a guy who didn't know that pickles were cucumbers. Like had no idea.
That's not obvious. Just to be clear, that's not
Okay,
obvious.
Cabbage. That's like,
Yeah, that's exactly.
All right. You guys are invited back for a discussion with the audience of the dumb things we have all believed.
Excellent.
I love that.
Excellent.
That's great. That
This
sounds
is a
like a
delight.
Saturday. You know what? I have a present for you, Ben. All next week is scheduled. It is scheduled,
Really?
including Labor Day. I've been updating the
Wow.
calendar, but you don't pay attention. But yes, it's all scheduled.
I'm excited.
You
about
have nothing to worry about. Yeah, I know.
All right. Who's our guest for tomorrow? It's
Adam
Adam Davidson.
Oh, that's much better.
Then you?
All right.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
No, Adam Davidson is a fun guy. And
Ask him the dumbest econ thing he's ever thought.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely do that.
Yeah, do that.
All right. On that cheerful note, Alan Rozenshtein, you are a great American. You've believed some really moronic things, but we love you anyway.
Probably still do.
I love you deeply.
And we will be back 22 hours and 53 minutes from now. And until then, we don't have fun anymore, but we have floating islands and cabbage soup instead. Have a good evening,
I'm fine
folks.
with one of those and not the other. Bye.
Bye, guys.
No,
Thanks
we
a
got,
lot.
We got both.
Thanks for having me.
Islands floating in the cabbage soup.